Lee Currington here, Family Budget Fisherman. Thank you for tuning in to another episode on this channel. Of course, as you read in the thumbnail and in the description below the thumbnail, I'm going to be talking to you about a subject that's really been kind of grinding me over the last several weeks, and that is all the discussion over how to hold a spinning reel. Yes, how to hold a spinning reel. Plus, I got a few baits that I want to share with you and give you a little bit of insight of what I bought and how much it costs. At any rate, let's get started. All right, welcome back. First of all, once again, I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for all the comments that are coming in and all of the feedback. I mean, you all are a very intelligent audience, and I really appreciate the kind of qualitative feedback in the comment section that you've been giving. So please continue. Please continue. I want to mention, as we're going to talk, I have several rods here to my left that I'm going to be talking about the proper way to use a spinning reel, and I got some baits here just below the camera on baits that I have made purchases, but it's going to be interspersed through the video. But the reason why I came up with this is because, quite frankly, I'm tired of folks who don't use spinning reels as a primary use of their fishing experience, giving the kind of advice on how to hold them in a way that I, as an exclusive spinning rod fisherman, chooses to hold a spinning rod. For the record, there is not one way to hold a spinning rod. I know with bait casters, because of the way a bait caster is made, you don't have the options available that those of us who throw spinning reels have. And I think that is a design innovation, a technical difference that broadens our experience with fishing rods as opposed to something that should be excluded to keep the narrow perspective of what persons who use bait cast rods do. So I'll give you an example. I am a multi-species fisherman. You know this. I catch mostly bass and crappie, but I catch catfish, bluegill, striped bass, trout, salmon, the occasional white bass, and several other species that are not really typical for most of us to catch. But my top 3 or 4 or 5 is, of course, bass, then crappie, then bluegill, because I love bluegill. And when I say bluegill, I'm talking also about shell crackers as well. There are different species in that family of fish. And then, of course, salmon, striped bass rather, and salmon and trout. Now, when I go fishing, I pick up a rod, and I'm going to use a rod. By the way, my 7-year-old son is in love with the Dobbins rod, the Dobbins Fury. He picked this rod up and said, "Daddy, this is the rod for me." But let's take a look. Let's just use this as an example. Now, I heard those people who primarily use bait casters say to me, a fisherman with 48 years of experience with this rod, this style of rod, that I am supposed to hold this rod this way, okay? Because this is the power hand. Now, let's just agree. You don't hold the rod this way, and you don't hold the rod this way. For any reason. There's no reason to hold the rod when you're fishing this way or this way, okay, with the hand below the reel seat in any way, and most definitely not hold it in a way that you would hold a different model of fishing rod. So now, this is what I was told, that this is my power handle. Now, I'm holding a Dobbins Fury. My ring size, this ring here is a size 17, okay? That's how big my hand is. You're telling me, I want you to see, my hand is on the rod blank. My thumb is on the rod blank. My finger is on the lock nut. And you're trying to convince me this is the best way for me to hold the Dobbins rod. This Dobbins rod. I contend to those of you who are listening, that is not the way to hold this rod. If you are holding this rod, your hand, and this is why the cork is here, the power for this rod is right here like this. One finger here, below the lock nut, not on the blank, securely right like this, with the rest of your fingers over the cork. And there's a reason why this is the way that it is. Because once you get your hand on the blank of this rod, you will lose power. I don't care if you're like this or like this, and definitely like this. You actually lose power. Your power for this rod is right here. Okay? Now, you're going to hear a theme in a few minutes. This is a 12-foot crappie rod, okay? If you fish this 12-foot crappie rod like this is one of the weakest positions to have with a spinning rod, okay? The strongest position for this rod is right here. See all that cork right there? I mean, all that, it's not cork, foam. It's right here. This is where you hold it, right here, okay? This rod is, you can cast with this rod, but this 12-foot crappie rod, this is a Shakespeare ugly stick crappie hunter. It's not an ugly stick, but it's in that, it's a lower end rod, and I love it, and I have 3 of these. And I love to fish with this 12-foot rod. Trust me when I tell you. And I catch some big crappies with it. So my point to you is this is a pitching and flipping style rod. Now, I know that's an anathema to many bait cast fishermen, because pitching and flipping and punching is, from bass fishermen's perspective, a bait cast nearly exclusive style of fishing. And I just want to let a lot of you know it's not the case, okay? This is the power handle for this here, okay? And you pitch and flip with this, and that's the reason why. When I have it, I have this line. I'm a two-handed fisherman anyway, and I flip this way. Let it sit. When I come back on it, I will lift. Most of the time, there's enough line for me to just lift the bait or lift the fish up and out of the water. But in the case where I don't, I have to reel up, I can set the hook. I got 12 feet. I can set the hook, and that still gives me time to come over here and begin my reeling, okay? And for me, I need that extra second of switching hands, because it slows me down in my fishing. It slows me down necessarily. It slows me down. So now, if I am fishing the Victory, okay, once again, where's that cork? You have foam back here and you have cork. Remember this, rod manufacturers create these rods a certain way on purpose. They don't just negligently throw cork up here and a little bit of foam back here. There's a reason for it. So if every time you held a rod, you only held it this way, you're going to miss what the technique specific opportunity is for you in that particular rod. This rod right here is also great for pitching and flipping. Okay, it swings magnificently for pitching and flipping. And for me, I can side cast this way, holding it like this. I can side cast left, right. I can flip under docks. I can flip under trees, tree limbs. I can flip sideways. And when you are side casting a spinning rod, your power is not to have the reel in between your fingers. It's to have it up here. Now, do you need to adjust it if you have certain styles of fishing? Yes. Okay. But this is not always the way to do it. In this particular case, you would want to hold it this way, okay, for certain styles that this demands. Now, if you're constantly reeling, then yes, then you will go back to the two and two, okay? But just pay attention to the rod. When you're selecting rods and you get to that point where you're selecting rods in this way, take a look at the way the rod manufacturer made the rod so that you will know what the rod manufacturer was intending the rod to do. Even those who make spinning rods intend for us to throw reaction baits with the rod. They intend to throw finesse baits. They intend to pitch and flip. Remember, a rod manufacturer doesn't really care whether you're throwing a bait caster or not. He wants to sell you, or she wants to sell you, a rod that suits your fishing style. So if it's spinning and you throwing crankbaits for spinning, and yes, I throw crankbaits for spinning, and I will outclass most people in throwing crankbaits with spinning rods, all the way down to about 20 feet. Yes, I will. So here we go. Now, this rod here, this is the Bass X, the new 2022 Bass X. This rod is primarily for casting, okay? So you would, in that particular case, you would rest your 2 and 2, 2 above the reel seat, 2 below the reel seat, and you will cast out and reel in, cast out and reel in. Yes, when you're throwing reaction baits, there is a tendency for, there is a tendency for the 2 and 2 hold. So I get it. And this is the most comfortable, okay? But just know that this is a position that is not universal to spinning rods. There is more of this linear style for bait casters, because all bait casters are made where the hand most of the hand sits at or below the reel seat. Very rarely will you see a bait caster where your hand fits above the reel seat. I get it, but that's not what spinning is about. Spinning is about diversity. And that's what I love spinning rods, because there is a diversity that exists there that is not as wide with bait cast equipment. So, yes, you will do this, okay? Here's another one. This is the the John Cruz drop shot rod, and I think I've done reviews on most of these rods. Now, here's something interesting about this particular rod. For those of you who don't know, this is a weighted butt rod. The butt handle, the butt of the rod is weighted, so you can feel it when you cast. Okay. Now, for this, when you're drop shotting, yes, it's very comfortable here. There's enough room here. There are 2 fingers there. That makes sense. It definitely does make sense. I think I knocked something out. Let me grab this real quick. There we go. So that makes sense. Okay. Now, but if I wanted, now watch this, to pitch and flip with this, notice how my hand, where the last finger is below the reel seat and the 3 fingers are above the reel seat. And that compensates for the weighted back end of this rod, which is why it's much more comfortable than going this way, like this, or this way, or even this way. Okay? So, in this particular case, I will hold it this way, and notice where my fingers are, as big as my hands are. There's the foam there. Okay? Now, so I'm saying to you, if I'm pitching and flipping, this particular rod is different. I want you to see how different every single rod can be. And let me restate for the record. This Dobbins rod, sometimes when I'm throwing reaction bait with the Dobbins rod, I'm like this, with just 1 finger above the reel seat, the other 3 below the reel seat. Okay? And I don't remember if I threw that in already, but I'm just saying it again. So what I'm saying to you is, when you're considering spinning rods, as I've probably said over and over again, please take into consideration the diversity of the style of fishing. This is why I suggest, particularly to you beginning fishermen, the rods that I did. They're very easy for you to adjust the handle to your size. Your hands could be as large as mine, or they can be half my size, you know. Like I said, my ring fingers are 17, for crying out loud. You have people with bigger hands who adjust better in certain styles, and you have people with smaller hands who adjust better in certain sizes. If your ring fingers are size 11, meaning your hand is somewhere in that neighborhood, your handle is going to be a little bit differently because of how flexible the spinning rod is in allowing for you to develop your technique based upon how you hold the handle. There are 2 ways that you should never hold your spinning rod, and like I said, that is with the rod with the reel up, facing upward under any circumstance, or with your hand, your full hand, below the butt of the below the reel seat rather. So, and let me also say, as I close out on this, for those people who continue to say that your power retrieve is this way, I disagree. Your thumb has more to do with your power than where your fingers are. If you're here, it's your thumb that keeps you steady and gives you the pull. If you're here, you depend on your thumb. Your fingers are not going to help you. Here's why. Because if your fingers are here, you're not going to be helped. At least if you're here, you have more control over the rod than you do when you're like this, under any circumstances. So once again, please challenge me in the comments below. If you believe that, you have something that is worth a different perspective to be considered, check me out. Okay. So, with that said, I was going to do some baits. I'll do them in maybe I'll do a part 2 to this. I'll share with you some baits. Maybe in the next video, I'll share with you these baits, and I'll make it a part 2, and I'll share with you all of the baits that I have here. But I think I've done a rant and I've gone long enough. But I want to tell you, under any circumstances, find rods that you find comfortable with, develop your technique, your style, your retrieve of the baits that you prefer. Your maturing in this sport will dictate how you hold the rod, how you hold the reel, just like any other part of this. So thank you for listening. And once again, don't do anything to get out there to break your family's budget, buying a bunch of equipment, buying a bunch of reels and rods and testing them out in the whole bit. Go to the store and test them. Go to fishing stores and test them out. And then do what you have to do. for the purposes. But by every means, as long as it's ethical and legal, get out there and break your personal best. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.